Okay, I'm back. This is your old friend Zeke, and this is part 2 of what we've been talking about with Andrew Jackson, the 7th President of the United States. Whew, there are spiders out here, folks. I am killing them left and right. What's going on here? Now, I did want to tell you one thing that we talked about just before in the last little episode that we had a discussion. We were talking about the Nullification Act. Remember that? We talking about that? Now, the people that supported that Nullification Act, you know what they cited? The Kentucky and Virginia resolutions. Yes, written by Madison and Jefferson. Yes, they did. These documents stated the individual states had a right to declare federal law unconstitutional. They have a right to declare law unconstitutional, and if they do, they don't have to follow that law. Has there ever been a time in these modern days that we've had this? Yes, there has. Yes, there has. I'm not going to tell you what it was. I'm not going to tell you. I want you to go and find out. But there has been some times where 50 states came against the law, and they said it was unconstitutional. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. Yes, it did. All the way to the Supreme Court. So let's get into what we're going to talk about today. Jackson, he did come against this Nullification Act, and you saw how he handled it, okay? He lowered the tariffs, and he really enforced that Force Act, that if you come against me, I'm going to come against you. And he said, I will send troops down there and bring you back in forcibly, if possible. He was willing to go to war. Old Hickory. You don't mess with Old Hickory. Even though he's tough, is he allowed to do that? Is he allowed to do that? He's going to do it. He's going to do it. I'm going to tell you something he's going to do this time, that he goes even against the Supreme Court decision. Can you do that? I thought the Supreme Court was the law of the land. It was a final law and a final decision when a problem came up. Well, here's the problem. The issue involved resettlement of Native Americans on new lands west of the Mississippi. Well, why? Why would you want to do that? Jackson, listen to what he says now. Now, you know, he don't like all Indians, but he does like some. He even adopted a young boy at 2 years old that was an Indian boy. That was after they killed everybody in the village. And the boy was sitting by his dead mother. I'm not judging. I'm just saying what the facts are, folks. That's just what it was. So, listen here. Jackson believed that Native Americans should give up their lands to white settlers. They should just give up their lands to white settlers. Why would he say that? And why would white settlers want them Indian lands? What have I always told you? Money. It's all about money here. And the money is in growing things. Cotton especially. Some of these people down south that had money, they wanted these Indian lands so they could expand their business. Plain and simple. We're going to expand our business, but we can't when them Indians are on this land. And that land is good for growing cotton and whatever else I want to grow. I want to make some money. So get them Indians off that land. Can't say it any plainer than that. I really can't. I don't want to say it, but that's pretty much how it is. Okay? He also believed that we could move these Indians to a new territory and they could live there, be happy. Everything is good. You know what that territory is called today? Oklahoma. Oklahoma. They just called it Indian Territory. Now, it was bigger than Oklahoma. It was a little bit bigger. But eventually, they would just call it Oklahoma. Them Indians didn't want to live there. And I'm telling you, there was Indians coming from the north all the way down to the south and out to the west, and they were pushing them everywhere. That's how they're going to do it. It turned into something really bad. It did. So let's get into this. At the beginning of 1830s, nearly 125,000 Native Americans had lived on millions of acres. I'm not talking thousands now. Listen to me here. I'm talking about millions of acres of land just in Georgia. Just in Georgia. Tennessee, Alabama, North Carolina, Florida. I'm not hearing any Massachusetts and Connecticut up there. Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, North Carolina, Florida, land that their ancestors had occupied and cultivated for generations. They'd been here way before the white man was here. By the end of the decade, very few would remain anywhere in the southeastern United States on territorial land that their ancestors had for centuries. Now, working on behalf of the white settlers who wanted to grow cotton on the Indians' land, the federal government forced them to leave their homelands and walk thousands, I'm not talking hundreds, I'm talking thousands of miles to a designated area that they called the Indian Territory over the Mississippi that now we would call today Oklahoma. How are they going to get them to move there? Are they going to pay them? Are they going to ship them by rail? There's no trains. There's no trains going out there. You got to walk. And they took everything they had, put it in wagons, and they forced them to walk and take whatever they had, go out to this Indian territory. Now, going way back, George Washington believed, President George Washington, I should say, that the best way to solve this Indian problem, they would call, was simply to civilize the Native Americans. You know what that means? It means changing your way of life. Do you want your life changed? The way that you live? Maybe some of you do, and maybe some of you need to. But maybe most of you say, no, I like my life the way it is. I'm talking a drastic change. Have we had a drastic change lately in this country on the way people live? Yes, we have. And it may last for a long time. How do you like it? I bet you don't like it. I bet you want things back to normal, don't you? So do I. Look at this here. I got spiders crawling on my hat. I got to do something about this. I don't like spiders. I don't. So getting back to changing your way of life. You don't like your way of life being changed. That's exactly what they're going to do to the Native Americans. They're going to change their way of life, make them civilized. Well, who's civilized? Just the white man? Is that it? Just a colonial people? Anyway, he wanted to do a little bit more than that. I'm not coming against George Washington. I'm just telling you what he said, okay? The goal of the civilized campaign was to make Native Americans as much like white Americans as possible. They encouraged them to convert to Christianity, to speak English, to adopt European-style economic ways of living, okay? European economic ways. Well, they was growing things. They were selling things. They were making things too. They also wanted the individuals to be able to own land and other property. Now, that's a good thing. That was a good thing. So I can see where he's coming from. But if I was a Native American, I would also see this. I don't want to change. Our ancestors have been living like this for thousands of years. We don't want to change. Should we have the right to change or not? We should. But society goes on. You want to be a productive part of society, sometimes you have to bend a little bit. And sometimes it's not good. But sometimes it is good. Now, Zeke, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. No, I'm giving you something to think about. I'm giving y'all something to think about. Sometimes you have to change. And as we grow, we change, don't we? Yes, we do. So let's get back to this. In the southeastern United States, many Choctaw, Chickasaw, Seminole, Creek, and Cherokee, these people did embrace these customs that I just got done telling you about. They did. And they were called the 5 civilized tribes. 5 civilized tribes. They did do things. That was good. That was all good. But Southern cotton planters still want this land. So in 1828, the Cherokees asked the Supreme Court, Cherokee now, to defend the rights of Native Americans in the Southeast. Defend our rights. Well, that's you got to go to the Supreme Court, so they would. So the state of Georgia had claimed that they had the right to make all laws for Cherokee people. Well, I don't know if they can do that because the Indian people are their own nation. Their own nation. They're not voting. They're not allowed to vote, are they? Well, if you can't vote, then I guess you're not a citizen. Then they are their own nations. A lot of the treaties were written with them understanding that these Indian people are of their own nation, and one nation can't tell another nation how they're going to have to live. Anyway, Cherokees presented a strong case. The federal treaties protected Native Americans as, here's that word again, sovereign, independent, self-ruling nations. Nations. Well, that's good. Now, there was um, a lot of work that went into this, okay? A lot of work went into this. There was a Cherokee leader named Sequoyah. Now, old Zeke, believe it or not now, is related to Sequoyah. Sequoyah, yes. He's half Native American and half English, what he is. But he's living among the Cherokee Nation. Very, very smart man. He developed an alphabet using letters that they could read and write in Cherokee. In Cherokee. Wow. They also published a newspaper called the Phoenix and a constitution to set up their government. They were just like the US of A. That's pretty impressive. It's pretty impressive what they're doing. Now, Chief Justice John Marshall, remember? Thomas Jefferson's cousin. Yes, he was. He sided with the Indians, the Native Americans, and said, listen, they got a good case, and they're right. So in 1832, Georgia was told that no actions were to take place against the Cherokee Nation. You can't do it. It would be unconstitutional if you did, and against the law. How about that there? How about that? Well, while the Supreme Court debated Cherokee Indians and their claims, President Jackson convinced his supporters in Congress to pass something called the Indian Removal Act of 1832. I'm sorry, 1830. Not 32. Indian Removal Act of 1830. I'm sorry. This act provided funds for the federal government to remove Native Americans from the eastern United States and from the north too, and from any land that they wanted. Okay? Any land they wanted. Wow. A lot of them did leave. A lot did leave. Yes, they did. Okay? The first Native Americans, they refused to sign these treaties, recognizing the law. Jackson, however, said, you're going to go. You're going to leave. Okay? So President Jackson ignores the supreme ruling of the Supreme Court. Jackson is going to move these people over the Mississippi to that Indian territory that we call today what? Oklahoma. Many of these people left. So let me tell you, the law required the government to negotiate removal treaties fairly then, voluntarily, peacefully. It did not permit the president or anyone else to coerce native nations into giving up their lands. However, President Jackson and his government frequently ignored the letter of the law. Remember, I'll do what I think is just and right, is what he used to say. I'll do what I think is just and right. And forced the Native Americans to vacate their land that they lived on for generations. In the winter of 1831, just a year after this act was taken effect, under threat of invasion by the United States Army, they're feeling a little bit what South Carolina just got done feeling. That force of the Army. The Choctaw Nation became the first nation to be expelled from its land altogether. They made the journey to Indian territory on foot, some bound in chains, marching double file, two by two, and without food, supplies, or other help from the government. Thousands of people died along the way. Thousands of them. It was one Choctaw leader that told an Alabama newspaper that a trail of tears and death. Native Americans refused to sign over land and sign a treaty that Jackson sent soldiers to force them, and he would do it at gunpoint. So we had to go. So a lot left. A lot from the north left. Some from the south started leaving. Now eventually this Indian Removal Act will continue. In 1836, the federal government drove the Creeks, the Creek Indians. Now, you know Jackson don't like them Creeks, man. Remember the Red Sticks? He don't like them. No, we don't. That's how we got Florida, from fighting down that way. Eventually, he would go after the Seminoles. But he drove the Creeks from their land for the last time. 3,500 of the 15,000 Creeks who set out from Oklahoma did not survive that trip. They set out for Oklahoma. They did not make it. 3,500. It's not over yet. It's not over yet, because the Cherokee Nation would be one of the last ones to hold out. Yes, they would not sign. Chief John Ross would not sign that paper. So until 1838, they told him, you're going to go. They finally had to agree to move west, or else they can't fight the U.S. government. It was too powerful. Chief John Ross is going to lead all these people on what they call a forced march. A forced march. They're going to have to go. Thousands of lives would be lost because of the weather condition. They would run into a snowstorm, a freak snowstorm. These people weren't ready for this. They weren't dressed for this. Many of them were barefoot, walking. There were some on wagons, but when some of them died, left them alongside the road in a shallow grave, if that, including Chief John Ross's wife. She died along the way. She was buried with others in a shallow grave. She's the chief's wife. And how she died? From pneumonia, when she gave some young children her coverings, her blankets. Something don't seem right to me. So let's see how this goes. I'm not going to tell you the whole thing. I'm going to have you look some of this up so you can look it up for yourself, okay? President Martin Van Buren. President Van Buren. Well, Jackson's out by this time. Jackson's out. President Van Buren sent General Winfield Scott. General Winfield Scott. Now listen here. And 7,000 soldiers to make sure that this removal process went smoothly. You got 7,000 soldiers. They all got weapons. They're going to move them right along. Scott and his troops, they forced the Cherokees into stockades. Old men, women, children, into stockades. And started putting them on wagons. Sound familiar? At bayonet point. At bayonet point here. While some of the soldiers looted their homes and belongings. They stole from them. Now, I'm not putting that all on General Scott, but when people take advantage of other people, they usually do it in a big way. Then they march them poor people 1,200 miles to Indian territory. 1,200 miles. Whooping cough, typhus, dysentery, cholera, starvation, all epidemics along the way. You think there's a pandemic going on now? It was spreading like wildfire through those people. They suffered. An estimated 4,000 to 5,000 Cherokees died along the way. 1/8 of the people died along the way to Oklahoma, including Chief John Ross's wife, Quady Ross. This became known as the trail where they cried. The white folks say the Trail of Tears. Now, I don't think everybody would have accepted that, but they got it done. And by 1840, tens of thousands of Native Americans had been driven off their land in the southeastern states and forced to move across the Mississippi to Indian Territory. The federal government promised that their new land would remain unmolested forever. But as the line of white settlers kept moving farther and farther, and eventually across that Mississippi, it shrank. That Indian country shrank. In 1907 now, Oklahoma became a state, and the Indian Territory is gone for good. What happened to that promise forever? Promises aren't forever. That promise isn't forever. Wow. I just don't know what to think about all that. Do you? It was not a good day in American history for that. There's a lot to look into. There's a lot to look into. Now, I'm not trying to just tell you one whole side of it. There's all kinds of sides. I also heard that there was some gold that was found in one of these creeks. And that's why I also wanted to move some of these people up. People are greedy, folks. There's some greedy people out there, and the more money they have, it seems they get what they want to. I don't know. I don't have that kind of money, but I sure wouldn't kick somebody off their land. Why can't we just learn to live together? Isn't that why Thomas Jefferson said that we are all created equal? We need to live together. It has nothing to do with color. It has to do with people. It has to do with people right here. Now, there was something else that happened. So you folks down there in Florida, you listen up here, because you probably know as much as old Zeke does, maybe even more about this person. Down in Florida, Seminole leader refused to listen to the government. His name was Osceola. Osceola. Now, Osceola was actually a Creek Indian living amongst Seminoles, kind of like a medicine man. Very important. Very important. And Osceola moved to Florida in the early 1800s while he was still in his teens. So he grew up with the Seminoles. He was a Seminole. One thing about the Seminole people, they accept a lot of people. Matter of fact, the Seminole people are the ones that would accept African Americans. They accepted runaway slaves, and they accepted them into their tribe as full Seminole Indians. How about that? And they even fought with them too. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. I learned something there. Now, Osceola, leader of the Seminoles in Florida, he was told to leave Florida. They were all told to leave Florida by American soldiers. Osceola wouldn't sign. There was a lot of tribes down there would not sign, would not even touch the feathered pen. They wouldn't even touch it. So what did Osceola do? He took out his knife and he stuck it down through it. He said, "There's my signature. We ain't doing it. We ain't going. We're staying right here. Well, guess what? There was a fight. Now, we'd already fought them Seminoles before. I shouldn't say we, because old Zeke was not part of this. I was not part of that Trail of Tears. I did not want to be part of that. I wouldn't. I wouldn't do it. And I wasn't part of this here with Osceola neither. I wasn't. No, I wasn't. I was in Tennessee, and I was working at a lumber mill. That's where I was. I wasn't part of it. Now, Jackson is going to use his troops down there in the Seminole War, the Second Seminole War, 1835 to 1842. The United States Army would eventually capture Osceola on October 20th, 1837. They were fighting. People were fighting down there, but it was hard to capture anybody because the more you start fighting them Seminoles, the deeper they went into the swamps, into the Everglades. Soldiers didn't want to go in there. There's gators in them Everglades, and snakes, and who knows, spiders. You know, Zeke don't like spiders. That's why I wasn't there. I don't like spiders. I don't like snakes. There's a spider right in front of me right now. I just don't like that. Now, they captured him October 20th, 1837, under a white flag of truce. Now, that ain't right. That ain't right. White flag of truce. You're not supposed to be capturing people under that because they're supposed to talk peace. At the time of his capture, though, he was very ill. He was sick with something. I don't know what it was. So while he was incarcerated in jail at Fort Marion, Florida, y'all know where that's at down there, Fort Marion, he discovered the United States military had discovered where Harjo town was. That's a Seminole town, where it was located. It was a secluded sanctuary for Seminoles, the elderly. Okay? It was a secluded place for the elderly women and men and some children. And he found out that he had ordered General Hernandez of the U.S. military to lay waste to this town. Osceola found out about that. Upon learning of this march to massacre his people's elderly, women, and children, he ordered a number of his warriors to escape from their stockade, where they were, okay, in an attempt to save the people from being slaughtered. Osceola's escaped warriors, they did escape. They made it out. They were a day or 2 days late. When they arrived, they found a number of the women horribly killed, dismembered. And the children were too. Yes, they were. Men, women, and children, all killed. All killed, folks. However, 33 of the Harjo tribal members escaped into the Everglades, there you go, and avoided being captured or murdered. Descendants of these people still live in this area. So if you know any place down there, you're watching this, descendants still live in that area. Now, Osceola and his family and warriors were removed from Fort Marion, Florida, and transported to Fort Moultrie, South Carolina. Here he died on January 30th, 1838. A form of strep throat. Today, what kills that? Penicillin. Penicillin we have for that. But they didn't have it back then, folks. No, they didn't. Osceola's death at Fort Moultrie in South Carolina was on the front page of papers all around the world. He became a very important person all around the world. Now, when Osceola was in prison, the United States was confident the war would end soon. We already got your chief, so the war's going to end. Guess what? It did. No. Although Osceola died in prison, other Seminole leaders kept the battle going on for more years after that. It kept going on. The army was getting tired. You know, we lost that first war we had with them, 7 years. We just walked away. So by 1842, listen here, 1842, a nominal end to these hostilities arrived. It happened. Though no peace treaty was ever signed by the U.S. government and the Seminole people. By this time, most Seminoles, they'd already moved from Florida. They said, we're tired of fighting. We're just going to leave on our own. And they relocated themselves to Indian Territory in Oklahoma. But a lot stayed. And there's some Seminole Indians. You all know that their Seminole Nation is still down there in Florida. So talk about standing up for your rights. They stood up for what they thought was right, didn't they? Yes, they did. And they're still there today to tell you the story. So if you know anybody that knows that history, talk to them. It's important. So let me go over a few things and see if you understand what these words mean. What does the word sovereign mean? Free, independent. That's what it means. It's independent. You're sovereign. You're independent. You can make it on your own. What is states' rights? States' rights believing that you can nullify a federal law if you feel it's unconstitutional, but states' rights, you're standing up for your own state. That a state stands up for its own without having the federal government interfere with what's going on. That's all. What does secede mean? What does that mean? Secede means that you're going to leave the Union of the United States of America. Can you do it? Is it constitutional? Just for giggles, I want you to look up the 10th Amendment. Because the 10th Amendment, I'm going to read it to you here in a second, says something maybe about that. We always know what the Trail of Tears is now, don't we? We always know. So, let me do this. I'm going to read you the 10th Amendment. I want you to see what you think it means, okay? Okay, getting these bugs and spiders out of the way. Here's what the 10th Amendment says. In the Constitution, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. What does that mean, Zeke? Well, let me see if I can clear it up just a little bit. This amendment protects the states and the people from an all-powerful federal government. Tyranny. That's what it's talking about. It protects the people from tyranny. It provides that the states or the people retain all powers except those denied them or those specifically granted to them. Okay? This reserved power provisions is a check on the necessity or the necessary and proper power of the federal governments provided in the Elastic Clause. The Elastic Clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18. You look that up. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18. Now, when did we get that amendment? 1791. 1791. I already told you what Hamilton and Madison thought about this. And I'm sure Jefferson did too. They are still fighting over this today. No, not those guys. They're in heaven. They ain't fighting about that. That's the last thing they got to worry about. They don't worry about anything at all anymore. But there are people that still want to fight over this secession business, whether it's right or whether it's not. I'm going to let you decide. What would you do? So if you were South Carolina, would you really want to secede? That's some pretty sticky business right there. Yes, it is. But later on, we'll find out why they maybe would do it again. All right, folks, part 2 is done. It is done. How about that? We talked about a lot of things. We've gone through a lot of wars and a lot of problems in the last couple of weeks, haven't we? But you all stayed with me, and I'm real proud of you. Yes, I am. I'm real proud of y'all. So you've done a really good job. But you know what? We're not done yet. No, we're not done. We still got lots of things to talk about. And as long as you're here and I'm here, We're going to talk about it. So, you know what I say? Be kind to somebody. A lot of bad things can happen. But when you're kind, what goes around comes around. How many times I told y'all that? What goes around comes around. That's my motto. Yes, it is. So when you're kind to somebody, they'll be kind to you. Yeah, they will. And those people that you love, you go out there and tell them that you love them right now. You go out there and tell them you love them right now. I mean, it's nice to say that to people, isn't it? And isn't it nice that they say it to you? I like to be told that somebody loves me. So you go ahead and do that for old Zeke now, won't you? You come back because we're going to be talking about some new things. The end of the age of Jackson. The end of the age. We already talked about the beginning and all the way through it, but now we're going to be talking about what happens at the end. A lot of things happen at the end. So you come back and find out. I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.